Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Community Trail Running Podcast. I am your host, Adam Lee. Thank you once again for joining me. I'm so happy that you're here and grateful that you've decided to spend a little bit of your time with me. Today is going to be a little bit different in that I don't have a guest, but I'm super excited to go over some of the tips you all gave me on the last post that went up on the newsletter, Trail Running Tips from Trail Runners. It was so much fun to get everything submitted from you. There were 31 runners from 7 different countries. I'm not going to read every single tip today. You're going to have to go to the newsletter to read some of the rest, but I'm excited to kind of highlight some of my favorites and add a few of my own little anecdotes and 2 cents to it all, because it was just so great to hear from you and hear what trail running is like around the world as far as what we find important to share with others, and seeing some common traits there, and then also just seeing individually what people thought was great to highlight. And it was just really fun. So I really want to thank all of the runners for submitting their tips. It takes time out of your day, and I appreciate you doing it. To be able to add it to this sort of thing and share it with everyone is really fun, but I really appreciate you taking the time. Get over to communitytrailrunning.com if you haven't already to subscribe and check out this post. Read the rest. I've gotten some great feedback from the name change to Community Trail Running and the new direction that we're heading. It kind of makes sense. I shouldn't say new direction, but just the name now making it obvious. And I think this was a great first post and podcast to kind of get into it all, because it was the community that supplied everything, and it's just great to share it all. So let's kind of get on with it, right? Thanks again to everyone that contributed. I kind of broke up the piece into advice from rookies all the way to veterans. And I'm going to start right with the rookies, the 0 to 2 years running. I know I have labeled them rookies, but the great thing is, out of all the runners that I had submit their tips, 77.4% of the runners have run a race that's at least 50 kilometers. So newbies, not new, doesn't matter. This group can cover some distance. I was blown away by that. I think that's so awesome. Way to go, everyone. Let's get into the tips, though. I think the fun thing about hearing from the rookies is, I know sometimes when we're learning things, we can take in so much information, and it's fun to hear what you find important in the beginning. And as we keep going along, sometimes we can forget some of those great tips from the start. So I thought some insight into every level of runner was fun, and the rookies obviously didn't disappoint. The first one that I wanted to highlight was Matt Cavers from Gibsons, BC, had a great one that stemmed from his encounter with a bear, and wildlife encounters are a big one I think people think about when they're getting into trail running and that sort of thing. So I thought this was a great place to start. Matt did an awesome job. He didn't run away. He spoke reassuringly. He backed away, and he found a detour. So I imagine his heart was in his throat after going through all of that, but he did great. He shared the tip. And if you go to the BC Parks website, which is also linked in the newsletter article, Matt did everything right. So way to go, Matt. That's a great one to share with everyone for people getting out onto the trails. Immaculate from Washington in the U.S. brought up a great point that you don't need to run races, as Matt wasn't doing, to enjoy trail running. It's really simple, but it's important to remember that. You know, you don't need to be signing up for races every time and going to the start line and that kind of thing. Like, just trail running is trail running, and a lot of people can run for themselves and find joy in that. And why not, right? It's wonderful to be out there. You don't need a race to have fun. You don't need a race to work up towards. And again, that's simple advice, but sometimes we forget that because you're always kind of trying to work to something, and just enjoy being out on the trails. Immaculate, that's a great point. The last one from the rookie bunch that I'm going to highlight is Hamish Wyatt from Australia. He gave me a bunch, but the simple one that I like for today is always tell someone where you're going. Along Matt's lines of dealing with wildlife, this is also probably another great one that when we're getting into trail running or at any level of trail running, always important to keep in mind is staying safe, and that is making a plan, letting people know where you're at, carrying the 10 essentials. The trails are amazing. They're a great playground, but we have a little bit of responsibility on our own side to stay safe and do what we can. So great point, Hamish. Always tell someone where you're going. No one's ever going to regret taking the few seconds to make sure that you've left that note. Thank you so much for submitting that one. That's 3 tips from 3 different countries. Not bad, eh, folks? I'm pretty happy with all the submissions. Thank you very much. We're going to move right along here to people that have been running for 3 or 4 years, called them the sophomores. And the first one we have is going to yet another country, Luke Merritt from Bristol, UK. He says, don't worry about time or pace and focus on exploration and enjoying where you're running, which is so important, kind of going into the mentality of trail racing and how we said you don't always need a race to be working towards. Same with when you're out there, you don't need to be flying down the trails. You're going to go slower on the trails than you ever would on the roads. And there's so much beauty around you that you might as well slow down and enjoy it. Frankly, the runs that you do that are slower and easier, the more often you do those, the more you'll prevent injury or at least give yourself a better chance. So it's good. You're taking care of yourself and you're taking in the scenery. It's a win-win. So Luke, great point. Take it all in while you're out there. Slow down. It is its own thing, and the trails are beautiful to enjoy. So enjoy them. And that goes into our next tip, which is great from Antonio, who's out of Mexico. He assures us it's okay to walk on those uphills. And this is a big one, I think, for people that are new to the sport. I often chat with people who don't know much about trail running because they haven't been involved with it, and they think that you're running the whole time. Sure, we want them to think that, but it's not necessarily the case, especially starting out. You should know that when you're getting into it and you get to a hill, it's okay to walk. That's what plenty of us are doing anyway. And that's a big part of trail running. So it's okay to walk on those uphills. We have to admit it out loud sometimes. That's fine, Antonio. Great point. And that's, of course, 5 tips from 5 countries. So we're just rolling right along across the world. We kept moving along to the regulars, which I've called. They were the ones running for 5 or 6 years. I know by this point in my running life, I was starting to dial in what kinds of food that I like on the runs, like hello, excuse to just drink maple syrup. And I definitely had some favorite routes that I could get to depending on how much distance I had to cover that day or how much time I wanted to be out for. So everything was kind of mentally checked at that point. And the runners that gave me some tips, the regulars as well, had some great additions to it. Gail McKay from Naalba, Scotland, gave a great tip. And this one goes along with favorite routes. She said get on that online access to some mapping software. She suggested OS Maps for the UK or an app like Strava where you can access routes to try out. This is a great way to see what people are running around you. As we talked earlier, it's important to people let people know where you're going. So don't go out completely unprepared just because you have a map on Strava. And also know, just like GPS, you can't always just follow it because it's online, but it's a great place to start to see what people are doing. You can kind of start conversations from there. Always be safe. But I think trail running is kind of always exploring too, right? So you're always going to kind of go between those and make sure that you're staying safe while you do it is the best way. And exploring more and more is really what makes trail running so much fun. Another great way to get out and learn new places is to run with groups. That's another great tip. This one comes from Alan Minke in Abbotsford. And Alan, I apologize if I butchered your name, but I won't butcher the tip, and that is find a great trail running group. It can help you find like-minded people that are running the same pace as you, that are looking to run in the same areas as you. I actually met Alan at an orientation run, which is not quite a trail running group, but usually a preview of a race or a section of a race, which is also another great way to get out and meet new trail runners and learn new trail systems, new trail spots. It's great to be with a group that sort of takes care of the stress of planning the route, so you can just follow along and learn the new trails. Some of the runners there will be super experienced, and they are some of the most welcoming runners that you'll ever come across. Those are the grizzled veterans, if you will. I've classified them with more than 7 years running experience in this format. These are the kind of folks that can describe, a trail turn by turn from their memory, and you can't really run anywhere with them without running into everyone that they know, kind of like running with the mayor. But here there's no campaigning, just tips. First one's from Sarah Lavender Smith. She's from Colorado, and her tip was simply take what the trail gives you. I thought that was great because you really have to. You don't have a choice. And if it's pouring rain, you got to deal with that. If it's smoking hot, you got to deal with that. We can't change it, so you just have to adapt it, figure it out. Trail running is so much fun, and part of that fun is controlling what you can control, and really you can't worry about the rest. You just have to take that as it comes. One thing that you can worry about, and plenty of you clearly worry about, is running downhill. There's good reason for that. It's hard and can be kind of scary. Axel Kussman of Ontario, Canada, suggested lots of practice running downhill, which makes a lot of sense. The more you do it, it can kind of take the edge off. It might always be scary, but at least if you're doing it often, you know how your body's going to react. You know what your feet are going to do. You can kind of get comfortable being uncomfortable. I like to descend. I grew up mountain biking. Even though it was in Ontario, there was still the whole having to choose a line and ride it out thing. So I have plenty of experience picking that out, and even though it was on a bike, it's very easy to apply it to running, but it did take a ton of practice. So Axel, you're bang on. Great tip, great name, Axel. We're going to roll along to the last tip that I'm going to give out over the podcast here. Such a great list. Get on the newsletter, check out the rest of them, but this one is from Matthias Eichler. He's originally from Germany. He's a friend of the newsletter. I've had him on the podcast before as he's directing races and trail running all over Olympia, Washington. He may have a tiny bit of a bias for this one, but the little bit that I know him now makes me more positive than not. That's not his motivation behind this tip, which was simply find your local trail race and run it. Enjoy the adventure. That's what it's all about. I got into coast mountain trail running races because they were the local ones and seemed fun. First race I signed up for was 8 kilometers. It wasn't some insane distance, and I was hooked. The atmosphere, the people, the trails. It was like, oh, this is great. Of course it is. But it took that first one to get out there. It was the local one. Just do it. You won't be disappointed. Your local trail race is awaiting. There's a fun group ready to run and share their experience with you, and I'm certain you will be glad that you did it. These tips were so great. There's so many more to check out. I want to hear from you as well. Feel free to comment, leave your own. Keep the conversation going, because that's what this is all about. I love the trail running community and these kinds of talks. But that is it for this one. A huge thank you to all 31 runners for contributing. A huge thank you to all of you for listening. Shout out to race volunteers everywhere. And until next time, I'm Adam Lee, and this is Community Trail Running.